You slept, but still woke up tired. Not just in your body, but somewhere deeper, like your heart didn't really rest. Maybe you moved through your day, did what you had to do, smiled when needed, but underneath it all, something felt heavy and unresolved, and you couldn't quite explain why. Maybe you've been telling yourself it's nothing, that it'll pass, that other people have it worse, so you shouldn't feel this way. But the truth is, there are disappointments you've never fully faced, and they've been quietly shaping how you see everything. The plans that didn't work out, the prayers that felt like they went unanswered, the moments you really needed something, and it didn't come, and instead of breaking down, you adapted. You lowered your expectations. You told yourself not to hope too much, not to feel too deeply, not to trust too quickly again. And over time, that quiet protection started turning into distance from others, from yourself, even from God in ways you didn't notice at first. But ignoring pain doesn't silence it. It just teaches it to speak in different ways, through numbness, through overthinking, through that constant sense that something isn't quite right even when everything looks fine on the outside. And maybe you've been carrying this longer than you realize. So right here, before we go any further, just notice this. You're not crazy for feeling this way. You're not weak for being affected by what you've been through. And you don't have to keep carrying this alone. If this feels even a little true for you, type this quietly, just for yourself. I'm ready to be honest about what I feel. No pressure, no performance, just honesty. For the first time in a while. First, it wasn't hardness. It was just protection, a natural response to something that hurt more than you expected. You told yourself to be careful next time, to not get your hopes up so quickly, to stay a little guarded so you wouldn't feel that same kind of disappointment again. And that made sense. But slowly, almost without you noticing, that protection started to change you. What began as wisdom turned into hesitation, then into distance, and eventually into a quiet resistance to feeling anything too deeply at all. Maybe you've caught yourself thinking, what's the point of hoping? Things never really work out for me anyway. Or even, I'll believe it when I see it. And those thoughts didn't come from nowhere. They came from moments that mattered, moments where you showed up with an open heart, and something didn't meet you there. So instead of risking that kind of pain again, part of you decided it's safer to stay closed than to be disappointed. But here's the quiet shift that happens. A guarded heart doesn't just block pain. It also blocks peace, connection, and the very breakthrough you've been needing. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your heart has been trying to survive, not receive. And maybe that's where you are right now. Not broken, just braced. Not lost, just tired of being let down. There's a kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly holding yourself together, from filtering your emotions, from never fully letting yourself feel or hope or trust the way you used to. And over time, that weight builds into something heavy and quiet. But this isn't who you truly are. This is just what happened to your heart after carrying too much for too long. And the fact that you're here right now, listening, still open in some small way, that matters more than you think. Because it means something in you hasn't shut down. Something in you is still reaching for peace, for alignment, for something real again. So before we move forward, just sit with this for a moment. You don't have to force your heart open. You don't have to pretend you're okay. You don't even have to have the right words yet. Just be willing to soften, even slightly. And if you can whisper this, Gently, my heart is safe to open again. One step at a time. No rush, just a small shift. Maybe this is where it gets uncomfortable, because part of you wants to be honest, but another part isn't sure if you're allowed to be. You've learned, somewhere along the way, to filter what you say to God, to clean it up, make it sound right, hold back the parts that feel too messy or too raw. So instead of telling the truth, you say what you think you're supposed to say. I'm fine. I trust you. It's okay. But deep down, it doesn't match what you actually feel. And that quiet disconnect, it creates distance. Not because God moved away, but because you stopped bringing your real self into the conversation. Maybe you've been thinking, if I admit how disappointed I am, does that mean I don't have faith? If I say I'm tired or confused or even a little angry, will that push God away? But God isn't intimidated by your honesty. He already sees what's in your heart. Not the polished version, not the filtered words, but the real emotions you haven't said out loud yet. And He's not waiting for you to get it right. He's simply waiting for you to be real. You don't need perfect words here. You just need truth. The kind that sounds like, I don't understand why this happened. I really hoped things would be different. I feel disappointed, and I don't know what to do with that. That kind of honesty doesn't push God away. It actually draws you closer, because now you're no longer hiding, and something shifts in that moment. Not everything at once, but something. The pressure to pretend begins to loosen. The wall you've been holding up starts to soften. And in that space, something deeper can finally begin. Real connection, real peace, real movement toward healing. So right here, no performance, no pressure, just you and God. If you're willing, say this quietly, in your own way, while you're simply being honest. Something deeper is already shifting into alignment. God doesn't rush healing. He restores. And restoration isn't just about fixing what was lost. It's about renewing you in a way that carries more peace, more strength, and even unexpected favor in areas that once felt empty. Maybe you thought that part of your life was over, that certain doors had closed for good, that some things just weren't meant for you anymore. But God doesn't work in final endings the way we do. He works in redemption, in open doors you didn't expect, in quiet miracles that don't always look dramatic, but feel deeply personal, in moments where you realize something that once hurt you no longer has the same hold on you. And sometimes, He doesn't just restore what was lost. He restores you beyond it. So the disappointment doesn't define you anymore. The delay doesn't weaken you, it deepens you. And what once felt like rejection begins to shift into protection, into direction, into something that makes sense in a way it couldn't before. Let's just pause for a second and gently reconnect this. God sees every moment you felt overlooked, every time something didn't come through, every quiet letdown you carried without telling anyone. None of it was ignored. None of it was wasted. And even now, something is being rebuilt inside you, not with pressure, not with force, but with patience, with care, with a kind of peace that doesn't rush but stays. So if you can just receive this softly, what was broken in me is being restored in a deeper way, not all at once, but truly, and this time it will last. You don't need to figure everything out tonight, but you do need something gentle, something you can return to when the emotions come back, when the heaviness shows up again. when old disappointment tries to settle back into your chest. So I want to give you a simple rhythm, not a rule, not pressure, just a way to move through what you feel without getting stuck in it. The first step is notice, not analyze, not judge, just notice. When that familiar feeling rises, tightness, numbness, quiet sadness, pause for a moment and simply admit, something in me is hurting right now. That small awareness begins to bring you back into alignment with yourself instead of running from what you feel. The second step is name. Gently put words to it. Maybe it's disappointment. Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's frustration you never expressed. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be honest enough to let your heart feel seen instead of silenced. The third step is release. This is where you stop carrying it alone. You don't have to solve it, you just have to hand it over. In your own words, in your own way, say, God, I don't want to hold this by myself anymore. And even if it feels small, that moment creates space for peace, for breath, for something lighter to enter. The fourth step is receive. This one is easy to skip. After letting something go, your instinct might be to move on quickly. But healing deepens when you stay for a moment and allow something back in. Not answers, just presence, just peace, just the quiet sense that you are not alone right now. And the fifth step is return. Because this isn't a one-time moment. It's a rhythm you come back to again and again, gently, without judgment, without rushing yourself to be fully healed. Each time you return, something softens a little more, something opens a little more, something inside you begins to trust again. This is how healing actually happens. Not all at once, but in small, honest moments that slowly become a breakthrough. So right here, let's make this personal. If you're willing, type this: I allow myself to heal, one honest moment at a time. No pressure to feel different immediately, but something is already changing. Because now you're not avoiding your heart. You're learning how to care for it. Just slow down for a moment. You don't have to do anything. Just be here, maybe close your eyes if that feels safe, and let your body settle even slightly. This isn't about saying the perfect words. It's about letting your heart finally exhale. Let's begin gently. God, I'm here. Not with perfect faith, not with polished words, just as I am. A little tired, a little guarded, carrying things I haven't fully said out loud. You see it all. The quiet disappointments, the moments that didn't turn out the way I hoped, the prayers that felt like they stayed unanswered, and the way I slowly started protecting myself so I wouldn't feel that kind of pain again. I've been holding more than I realized, and I don't want to carry it alone anymore. So right now, I bring it to you. The disappointment I still feel, the heaviness I've been pushing down, the questions I don't have answers to. I release it, not because it doesn't matter, but because it matters enough to place it in your hands instead of letting it keep weighing on my heart. And God, in this quiet moment, meet me here, not with pressure, not with expectations, but with your presence. Where I've become guarded, soften me. Where I've lost hope, gently restore it. Where I've felt distant, draw me back into alignment with you. Slowly, safely, honestly. I don't need everything to change at once, but I do need peace. Real peace. The kind that settles inside me even if my circumstances haven't shifted yet. The kind that reminds me I'm not alone, not forgotten, not overlooked. Let that peace come in now. Even if it's just a small sense of calm, a quiet breath, a subtle release of tension I didn't even know I was holding. I receive that, and I trust, even if it's just a little, that something deeper is happening, that healing is unfolding, that restoration is already beginning, that what felt stuck is slowly starting to move again. So I don't have to force anything. I can rest here, held, seen, cared for. And as I leave this moment, I don't carry everything back with me. I leave some of it here, with you, and I walk forward, lighter than I was before. Amen. If you're still here, just breathe for a second. And if you can, type this softly. I am releasing what I've been holding. No rush, just a quiet step into something new. You don't need to go back to who you were before, because part of you might be thinking, I just want my old heart back. The one that trusted easily, hoped freely, didn't overthink everything. But that version of you didn't know what you know now, didn't carry what you've carried, didn't grow in the ways you've grown. And you're not meant to erase that. You're meant to move forward softer, but stronger. There's a difference. A soft heart isn't a fragile one. It's a heart that has felt pain, but didn't let that pain turn into permanent distance. It's a heart that knows disappointment, but still chooses, slowly, carefully, to remain open to peace, to connection, to the possibility of something good again. And that's where you are now. Not fully healed, but no longer closed. Not completely certain, but willing to trust again, even if it's just in small ways that no one else sees. Maybe it looks like this. You let yourself feel something, instead of shutting it down. You speak honestly, instead of pretending everything is fine. You allow a little hope, without needing guarantees. Those are quiet shifts, but they matter more than dramatic changes ever could. Because this is how real renewal happens. Not in one big moment, but in consistent, gentle choices that slowly reshape your heart from the inside out. And as you keep moving like this, something else begins to unfold. You start to notice peace showing up more often. Not perfectly, but consistently. You feel a little more grounded, a little more present, a little less controlled by what used to overwhelm you. That's not random. That's healing. That's your life coming back into alignment. Not because everything outside has changed yet, but because something inside you has. So as you step forward from here, don't rush yourself. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to be fully fixed. You just have to stay honest, stay open, and keep returning to what you felt in this moment. And when doubt comes back, because sometimes it will, just remind yourself, I'm not where I used to be. Something is shifting. Something is opening. Something is healing, even now. So walk gently. Stay close to that quiet peace. And trust this, you're not moving backward anymore. You're moving forward, with a heart that is learning how to live again. If this moment meant something to you, you can stay connected here. Not out of habit, but as a quiet decision to keep choosing healing, one step at a time. Before you move on, just stay here for one more moment. Notice what feels different. Maybe it's small. Maybe it's just a little more space in your chest, a slightly quieter mind, or a subtle sense of peace you didn't have before. That matters, because healing doesn't always arrive as a big miracle. Sometimes it begins as a quiet shift you almost overlook, and over time, that shift becomes something steady, something real, something that stays. So don't rush past this. Let it settle. And if something in you feels even slightly lighter, just acknowledge it. Something is changing in me. Not forced, not exaggerated, just true enough for this moment. If you want to keep walking this path, gently, consistently, you don't have to do it alone. You can stay connected here, like this video, not out of habit, but as a quiet decision to keep choosing your healing. Or if you're ready to go deeper, there's a next step waiting for you. But for now, just breathe. You showed up for yourself today, and that is where everything begins. And that's okay, because this wasn't about escaping your life, it was about changing how you carry it. You don't need to hold on to this feeling perfectly. You just need to remember you can return to it. Maybe later today, something small triggers that old heaviness again. A memory, a message, a moment that doesn't go the way you hoped. And for a second, you feel that familiar weight trying to settle back in. This time pause, not for long, just long enough to notice. I've felt this before. And instead of pushing it down or letting it take over, you come back to what you practiced here. You notice, you name, you release, you receive, you return. Not perfectly, just honestly. And in that small moment, something powerful happens. You break the pattern. That's how real change begins. Not by never feeling pain again, but by no longer being controlled by it. And the more you do this, the more your heart learns something new. The safe to feel again, the safe to hope again, the safe to live without constantly bracing for disappointment. So as you go back into your day, carry this with you. You are not as stuck as you thought. You are not as far from peace as it felt. And you are not walking through this alone. Something has already begun, quietly, gently, but truly, and you can come back to it anytime you need. I don't have to carry this the same way anymore. And in that small pause, you create space. Space to breathe, space to choose differently, space to stay in peace, instead of slipping back into that familiar heaviness. This is what real change looks like. Not loud, not dramatic, but consistent and deeply personal. And the more you meet yourself like this, the more your heart begins to trust again. Not blindly, but wisely. Not all at once, but steadily, in a way that feels safe and real. So as you move forward from here, stay gentle with yourself. Stay honest about what you feel. And keep returning to that quiet place where you felt even a little bit lighter, because that place is real, and it's still available to you, even now. If you can carry this with you, I am learning to live without holding everything inside. That's enough for today. Before you go, if something in you feels even slightly different right now, that's not random. That's a shift, and you don't need to chase it, you just need to return to it. So if you want to keep building this, gently, consistently, stay here, not out of habit, but as a quiet decision to choose peace again.